Welcome back to Keep It Real Boxing. This is Cypher Box. So I just wanted to do a quick video on this Instagram post that Dillian White put up the other day. I found it quite funny, where he branded Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder cowards for not fighting him. Okay, before I carry on, I just want to say one thing. Everything I referenced that I've used as evidence for this video is linked in the description of the video. So articles, interviews by the Boxing Voice recently with Eddie Hearn, it's all in the description of the video as always, to kind of back up what I'm saying here. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the actual post that Dillian White put up, and then I'm going to give you my take on it. So this is what Dillian White had to say. Embarrassing bunch of cowards, at Bronze Bomber, at Gypsy King 101, let's go chumps, hashtag clowns. Tyson Fury replied, he said, cowards with question marks. It could have been you, but someone didn't want to fight the final eliminator versus Ortiz, did you, coward? So that's why you're not fighting Wilder. Also, let's face facts here. You struggled with Derek Chisora, and you should have lost that by at least 4 rounds. Then Joseph Parker nearly knocked you out in round 12. You ran away from White Rhino all night. What have you ever achieved? Oh, I remember you got sparked by Anthony Joshua for the British title, didn't you? The facts are, you're just a dosser for at Eddie Hearn, hoping you might get something from the leftovers of Anthony Joshua's play. And remember who you're talking to, the Gypsy King, the man who has done everything that you could only dream of. Hashtag I know you're a shithouse dosser, enjoy being a workman for Eddie. And Dillian did reply to that, saying, unlike you, I'll fight anyone, Tyson Fury. You refused to fight me as I knocked you down so many times in sparring, and if you pull out in November with yet another fake injury, I'm more than happy to take your place and smash up that at Bronze Bomber. Alright, so there's a lot of things I'm going to point out here on this one, and I'm going to come out and just say right from the off that Dillian White is quite clearly hating on the whole fact that we're going to see a big fight potentially between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. Okay, so he's a little bit upset. He's been crying for a while now, that he's, the WBC's #1 contender, ranked contender. He should be the mandatory challenger, etc., etc., and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of AJ fans who are posing as Dillian White fans because it fits their agenda. Because to be fair, Dillian White didn't have a lot of boxing fans before supporting him in the UK. He did have some, but not to the amount that he has now. And the reason that a lot of these fans have jumped on the Dillian White bandwagon is simply because they're AJ fans, and if Dillian White could get into a fight with Deontay Wilder and beat Deontay Wilder, it fits their agenda. Simple fact of the matter is that when Dillian White and AJ fight, we'll see how many Dillian White fans there actually are and how many AJ fans there actually are. And I reckon that there's not going to be a lot of people supporting Dillian White if that fight ever takes place, the rematch between Dillian White and Anthony Joshua. Okay, but as I was saying, these so-called Dillian White fans, these AJ fans who are posing as Dillian White fans, are basically supporting this narrative that, oh, the WBC is corrupt, oh, they're protecting Deontay Wilder and all this sort of nonsense and stuff like that. So I kind of have a question for the AJ fans out there and Dillian White, is where was White and the AJ fans when AJ fought Brazil? And you're probably thinking, what you on about? What has this got to do with anything? I'll explain. Where were you when AJ fought Brazil? Because if I remember right, and I've linked the articles in the description of the video, when AJ fought Dominic Brazil in his first defense of his IBF crown, Dominic Brazil was ranked 13th. He was ranked 13th by the IBF. Okay, where was Dillian White and the AJ fans saying that's out of order, that's bang out of order, oh, AJ shouldn't be fighting the guy who's ranked 13th, he should be fighting, in a voluntary defense, he should be going after the #1 contender, that's unfair to the #1 contender at the moment, no, this is out of order. Where were you? Why weren't any of you lot protesting back then? when Anthony Joshua fought the number 13th ranked heavyweight by the IBF in his first defense of his title, which was a voluntary defense. Where were you then? And I've got the proof. The links to those articles are in the description of the video. Yeah? One of those articles is from BBC Sport, confirming that Dominic Brazil was ranked number 13th. But you didn't have a problem with that. You didn't have a problem with that AJ wasn't fighting the number 1 contender in the IBF rankings then. And even if he didn't fight AJ, didn't fight the number 1 contender, at least someone in the top 5 of the IBF rankings. My point is, there are other fighters in higher position who probably deserved that shot and didn't get it, but none of you objected to it. None of you objected to Anthony Joshua fighting Dominic Brazil, who was ranked number 13th, and neither did Dillian White. My other question is for you guys, where were you when AJ fought Klitschko? Klitschko had an 18-month layoff. An 18-month layoff. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've been hearing a lot of people saying on like the Boxing Voice call-ins and stuff like that, saying that, you know, what has Fury done to deserve this shot against Wilder? You know, how's he managed to get himself in this position? He's been out of action for so long. Well, okay, what did Vladimir Klitschko do? Because he lost to Tyson Fury, right? And Dillian White himself said that when you lose to the champion, you have to go all the way back down to the bottom and start again. And he was making reference to Luis Ortiz, because Luis Ortiz has been ordered to fight Dillian White for the second mandatory position for the WBC belt, or WBC mandatory challengers position, should I say. Yeah, and he said when you lose, so Luis Ortiz, why is he even there? Luis Ortiz lost, Dillian White said, so he should go all the way back down to the bottom of the rankings, or at least to the bottom of the top 10, or just outside the top 10. Well then, where was your problem with Vladimir Klitschko? Why weren't you saying the same thing about Vladimir Klitschko? Vladimir Klitschko had an 18-month layoff. He was coming off a loss to Tyson Fury. He had no tune-up fights, and he immediately got a title shot against Anthony Joshua. And they threw in the vacant WBO and the vacant WBA titles. But I didn't see any of you Anthony Joshua fans or Dillian White himself protesting that. But you felt it's okay, but you guys are now protesting that, oh, you know, Dillian's been shafted, Dillian's been screwed out of his mandatory position here, etc, etc. Excuse me, double standards. Clear double standards. So for all you AJ fans, including Dillian White as well, who are pushing this narrative, along with Eddie Hearn, you're full of shit. Because when it came to AJ, you had no problem with it. But now it's the other way around, the shoe's on the other foot, and it's the case with Deontay Wilder, you suddenly have a problem with it. And you're calling it corruption. I mean, at least Tyson Fury is undefeated, and he was the man who beat the man, which made him the lineal champion of the world. Vladimir Klitschko was coming off a loss and an 18-month layoff. Guys just make me laugh, and this is what my channel's all about. Yeah, it's not about hate. Yeah, a lot of people think I hate AJ, I hate Eddie Hearn, I hate Dillian White, I hate all these people. No, it's about exposing the truth. That's why I started this boxing channel. That's why it's called Keep It Real Boxing, because that's what I intend to do. Keep it real with you. And the facts are, clear double standards are being shown here by Dillian White and these AJ fans posing as Dillian White fans, and Eddie Hearn. Because you didn't have a problem with it when it came to Vladimir Klitschko. You didn't have a problem when it came to Dominic Brazil, who was ranked 13th. Yeah, alright. But you've got a problem now with Dominic Brazil being the number 1 mandatory challenger to Deontay Wilder's WBC belt. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And now you've got a problem with also Luis Ortiz. You know, the WBC ordering you to fight Luis Ortiz for the second mandatory position. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is the interview that Eddie Hearn gave to Nesta Gibbs and the Boxing Voice. And shout out to Nesta Gibbs and his channel, the Boxing Voice, of course. Been putting out some really good content over the last few days, especially with Wilder coming over here, and now these interviews with Eddie over in the US. So shout out to his channel. But they got into it with it, you know, they were talking about Tyson Fury. And again, like I said, that interview is linked in the description of the video, right? Of this video. And they were talking about the whole, you know, Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury trading words over social media, which I just spoke about earlier on in this video. And then they got into the whole mandatory challenges position for the WBC belt. And this is what Eddie Hearn turned around and said, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but Eddie Hearn said that Brazil was supposed to fight Stavern in a final eliminator because Stavern was #1 and the mandatory challenger. But he said Stavern pulled out, so Brazil fought Molina in a final eliminator. Okay? That's not exactly true. Okay? So let me break it down to you what actually happened. Yeah, Eddie hasn't really told that story right. What was supposed to happen was Bermane Stavern was the #1 mandatory challenger to Deontay Wilder's WBC belt. Okay, Deontay Wilder wanted to fight Luis King Kong Ortiz. In order to make the fight with Luis Ortiz, he had to pay Bermane Stavern step-aside money, which he did. And Bermane Stavern stepped aside and took the option to fight the winner of that fight between Ortiz and Deontay Wilder. But Luis Ortiz failed a drug test. The fight was called off. So Deontay Wilder then took his WBC mandatory defense, which was against Bermane Stavern. Now, before Ortiz failed the drug test, when the fight between him and Deontay Wilder was still on, yeah, and that was supposed to take place in November, whenever it was, right? That's when the WBC ordered the final eliminator fight between Bermane Stavern and Dominic Brazil. But that's what Eddie Hearn's reference to, where he says, oh, Stavern pulled out. Yeah, he pulled out because he was going to make his mandatory challenge of Deontay Wilder's WBC belt because Luis Ortiz had failed a drug test and the fight with Luis Ortiz at that time was off. Obviously they fought later on down the line in March, but that's why. Now Dominic Brazil is left hanging. He's paid his sanctioning fees, yeah, of course, to put himself in that position. So he's been left hanging. So the WBC, to make him happy, ordered a fight between Dominic Brazil versus Eric Molina. Dominic Brazil obviously won that fight and became the #1 mandatory challenger. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you an audio clip, and you know how I like my audio clips, right? I'm going to play you an audio clip, and it's Mauricio Sulaiman, yeah, the president of the WBC, explaining this whole situation regarding the WBC mandatory challengers position. Right now, it's about 2 or 3 minutes long. He starts off the interview talking about Joshua Wilder, and then he goes into the whole Dillian Whyte situation. And just hear what he has to say.
No, not halfway. They offered him 50 million for Joshua.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. Take it and do the fight.
Maybe more, if it does more. 50% of whatever it does. Yeah, there's an upside.
I mean, I think it's they can do it immediately. They should do it immediately. Hopefully.
What about White? Why is Dillian White not fighting? And why did you order the fight between?
Okay. Now you're joining the bandwagon.
No, I just read it.
No,
I saw what Michael Buffer tweeted out. I wanted to ask you.
But we have reported this for months. Very simple.
Thank you so much.
Wilder was going to fight Ortiz. In order to make Wilder Ortiz, Bermane Stavern, who was the mandatory, was negotiated to do a final elimination with Brazil. That was the only way he would accept to participate and to allow Ortiz to fight Wilder. That happens like a month before, 3 weeks into it. Ortiz has a banned substance, so the fight is off. And then Steven moves on to fight against Wilder. And a signed contract by Brazil was to fight in a final elimination. We had a legal complication, so his fight, and he won, was a final elimination. If Molina won, it was not a final elimination. It's a regulation, it's a legality that it's complicated. But we went out and we said it since day one. He won and he became the mandatory. Then after that, Dillian White won the silver title, and he defended the silver title, and he's ranked #1 by the WBC. So we are not in any way interfering with Dillian White. None of his rights have been stepped on. The WBC considers him to be the #1 challenger in the division. But Dominic Brazil won a final elimination and the mandatory status. So we just ordered Dillian White to fight Ortiz in a final elimination, a high-profile fight that would put him also as mandatory contender. The problem is they are claiming that they want to erase Brazil. So I understand his position, but the explanation, it has been clear since October of last year.
So there's Mauricio Sulaiman, the WBC president, explaining the whole situation. Clear as day. Yeah, pretty much exactly how I said it. Okay. In order for Bermane Stiverne to originally step aside to allow Wilder to fight Ortiz, yeah, one, he wanted step aside money, but two, he said right there with Mauricio Sulaiman that Stiverne was not scared to fight Brazil in a final eliminator. And he said, in order for me to step aside, one, I need to get paid for it, and two, I want that fight with Brazil too. And that's what they did. Now, Brazil, when he signed the contract to fight Stiverne, in that contract said that it would be a final eliminator fight. It would be a final elimination fight for the mandatory challenger's position for Deontay Wilder's WBC belt. But unfortunately, Luis Ortiz failed his drug test. So the fight between Wilder and Ortiz was off in November. So what happened then? Stiverne jumped back in and took his made his challenge for Deontay, his mandatory challenge for Deontay Wilder's WBC belt. That left Dominic Brazil in a position like, well, hold on, I just signed a contract legally saying that I would get an opportunity in a final eliminator to be the next mandatory challenger. So the WBC had to appease him from a legality standpoint as well, and they made a fight with Eric Molina as a final elimination fight. But he also stated in that interview you just heard that if Dominic Brazil won, he would have gone on to become the mandatory challenger to the WBC belt that Deontay Wilder is holding. If Eric Molina had won the fight against Brazil, Eric Molina would not be the mandatory challenger to Deontay Wilder's WBC belt. Okay? Now, yes, he also stated that, yes, Dillian White did win the silver belt and he defended it, and that put him as the #1 challenger. But from a legality point of view, we had to appease Dominic Brazil. So actually, Dominic Brazil was in a position. Now remember this as well, guys. Yeah, I'm going to link the article. I'm going to link a couple more articles in the actual description of the video. Don't forget this. When Dillian White, when this all was being said in October, etc., and stuff like that, Dillian White was ranked #3 by the WBC. He was not ranked #1. Before the Robert Helenius fight, he was not ranked #1. Yeah? Luis Ortiz at that time was ranked #1 before he failed his drug test. Don't forget that. So when this was arranged with Dominic Brazil, Dillian White was not the #1 challenger. Yeah? When this fight with Stiverne, the contract was signed, when he was supposed to fight Stiverne in the final elimination fight, Dillian White was ranked number 3 by the WBC, and number 1 was Luis Ortiz. Okay, so don't forget that. So that means Dominic Brazil was in a position, he was ahead of Dillian White when it came to that Manny challenger's position, because that's what they offered him. That's what Stavern wanted, to step aside. He wanted step aside money, and he wanted the fight with Dominic Brazil. And he wasn't afraid to have a final eliminator with Dominic Brazil. But because Dominic Brazil signed a contract, from a legal standpoint of view, the WBC had to follow through. And at that time, Dillian White wasn't fighting in any final eliminators. He was ranked number 3. He wasn't ranked number 1. I know that's a bit confusing, but this does happen in boxing. It's nothing new. There's plenty of times in all the boxing commissions, it happens all the time, where number 7 gets a shot in a final eliminator against another fighter who's a little bit ranked highly than him, and then they go on to become the mandatory challenger. It happens all the time. This is nothing new in boxing. But you guys out there are making like this is brand new, and oh, this is the first time it's ever happened in the history of boxing. No, it's not. It's happened on many occasions where the mandatory challenger isn't necessarily the number 1 contender. It happens all the time in every boxing commission. WBC, IBF, WBO, WBA, they all do it. It's how it works. So stop crying, fussing and pissing and moaning, because that's the way it is. I find it amusing when fans get upset about things like this when it comes to their favourite fighters. But when it happens, you know, on other occasions, which it has done on plenty of occasions in the past, you know, these same fans, in this case the AJ fans, don't get upset about it. They don't even bring it up. They don't even raise it. Do you know what I mean? They're not even aware what's going on. You know, none of you're not even aware of what's going on when this has happened in the past like this. But because it's to do with Dillian White, and you AJ fans want to see Dillian White fight Deontay Wilder, you know, suddenly, oh my god, it's corruption. It goes on all the time in boxing. And this tells me when people, I'm not saying it's right, yeah, okay, but that's the way it is. That's the business of boxing. And that's not just the WBC, that's all the sanctioning bodies. They all do this. All of them do it. They do. Yeah? But you can't make it out like, oh my god, the WBC's corrupt. They're corrupt. No, they're not. They're all corrupt. Do you know what I mean? It's like every single one of the boxing commissions work this way. There isn't one that doesn't operate like this. Okay? But because it fits into your agenda, you want to start labeling the WBC as corrupt. You know, none of you label the WBA corrupt when they pulled that 24-hour deadline for Joshua and Povetkin to be fight, and then it wasn't signed in 24 hours. I don't see any of you complaining now, or up in arms saying, oh, why wasn't the fight signed in 24 hours? Do you know what I mean? It was something like 20 days later or something like that, they finally announced the fight, because they wanted to get Wembley Stadium, they wanted this, they wanted that. It's like you guys will pick and choose what's, you know, seen as corrupt or dodgy. Yeah? And the only time you actually highlight things is when it affects Anthony Joshua or, you know, the likes of Dillian White. But you ignore in the past that when these sort of things have happened, and you never ever raise them. If you're a real boxing fan, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen this many times. I'm not saying it's right, okay, but that's the way the business works. That's the nature of the business. And Eddie Hearn knows this. Not only that, Eddie Hearn was trying to get Dominic Brazil, I believe, to fight Dillian White on October 28th on the Anthony Joshua, at that time, Anthony Joshua versus Pulev undercard. And Dominic Brazil turned the offer down because he was only given 3 weeks notice for the fight. Now, it makes me wonder, why was Eddie Hearn trying to make that fight? Because when you think about it, Eddie Hearn, and I always said this, a lot of people hate Eddie Hearn. They absolutely hate Eddie Hearn. I haven't got a problem with the guy. I'm just calling him out on his bullshit, in my opinion. Yeah? But I've got nothing against the guy. But a lot of people out there absolutely hate Eddie Hearn, right? But the one thing I've always said about Eddie Hearn, he is a good promoter. He is a good promoter because he always has a plan and a strategy for his fighters. And I'm starting to wonder whether part of that strategy was to fight Dominic Brazil, because Eddie Hearn knew that Dominic Brazil was going to be lined up as the next mandatory challenger potentially. And therefore, because he'd probably been paying his sanctioning fees, so he was getting lined up for the next mandatory challenger's position. And then Eddie Hearn thought, well, if I make Dillian White versus Dominic Brazil and get that fight signed, and then afterwards, like Eddie usually does in these situations, turn around and say to the WBC, how about making this the final eliminator for the WBC mandatory challenger's position? And the WBC probably would have turned around and said, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll you know, that's what Dominic Brazil's been working towards, and Dillian's ranked number 3, so why not? Let's make that fight a final eliminator. Do you see what I'm trying to say? But it didn't work out that way for them, because Dominic Brazil was like, no, I'm not fighting Dillian White. I'm going to fight Stavern over here. So Eddie's found another angle was trying to find another angle to get into that mandatory challenger position. And what he also wanted was, he wanted to make, if Dillian White was made the number 1 mandatory challenger, he wanted to make the fight between Deontay Wilder and Dillian White on February 3rd of this year, after his win over Stavern. But remember, once he's made his mandatory defense against Stavern, it's another year or year and a half before he has to actually do his next mandatory defense. That's Deontay Wilder I'm talking about there. So Dillian White still would have been waiting well over a year for his shot against Deontay Wilder. So I don't know what everyone's complaining about. Now, let's not forget, again, I've linked the article in the description of this video. I've done this before as well, where Wilder told the Boxing Voice, this was some time back now, he told the Boxing Voice in an interview when he was on their podcast, saying that if White fights and beats Ortiz, he would fight White next. You know, White keeps claiming that, oh, he won't guarantee me a fight and all that. He did. He said, if you fight and beat Luis Ortiz, I'll fight you next. That was Deontay Wilder to Dillian White. I've linked the article again in the description of this video. Read the entire article because it's somewhere at the bottom where Deontay Wilder says this. But that article took that quote from the Boxing Voice, and I remember listening to the Boxing Voice and hearing Deontay Wilder actually say that. So why didn't you? There was another incentive to fight Ortiz, right there. You know, and I said this before. If Dillian White fought Ortiz and beat Ortiz, and then Deontay Wilder said, "No, I'm not giving you a shot," I would have done a video saying, "Oi, you're not a man of your word." I would have called him out on it. But because Dillian White never even took the Luis Ortiz fight, we'll never know, will we? But I'm pretty sure if Deontay Wilder sounds like the sort of person when he says something, he means it. So there you go. You had an opportunity there, but you didn't want to have that final eliminator. And not only that, even if Deontay Wilder didn't give you a shot after that, you've still put yourself in a position and lined yourself up to be a mandatory challenger eventually to Deontay Wilder's title. Right? You still hold that position. And not only that, you are the one who's going around saying that, oh, Ortiz is over the hill, he's old, he's fat, he's this, I'll smash him to bits. Well, if you would smash him to bits, why wouldn't you take an easy fight like that then? If that's what you're saying, that's what you're basically saying. You're saying it's an easy fight, right? So if it's an easy fight, if Luis Ortiz is such an easy fight, why didn't you take the fight? And put yourself in a really strong position. Now, Eddie Hearn also said in his recent interview with the Boxing Boys and Nesta Gibbs, again, links in the description of this video, he also said that there was no value in fighting Luis Ortiz because White moved up the WBO rankings after fighting Joseph Parker and did it for more money. So basically what he's saying, there was no value in fighting Luis Ortiz, but there was value in fighting Joseph Parker because he moved up in the WBO rankings and he got paid a lot more money for it. all right, instead of fighting Luis Ortiz. Okay, and he also said that Luis Ortiz was a very risky fight. Not my words, that's Eddie Hearn's words. A very risky fight. Okay, and I've said this before. The reason Dillian Whyte fought Joseph Parker because Dillian Whyte thought Joseph Parker was going to be an easy fight for him. He didn't see any kind of threat there at all, especially after Joseph Parker's performance against Anthony Joshua. So Dillian Whyte thought, oh, this is easier, let's go this route. And then it ended up being a tough night for him because he nearly got knocked out in the last round. Don't get me right, I had Dillian Whyte winning on the rounds, yeah, on the scorecard. But I felt the last, was it 3 rounds? I felt Joseph Parker came back into it and made it a very close fight and then actually knocked him out and nearly knocked, and also nearly, if he had more time, he would have knocked him out. He would have knocked Dillian Whyte out. Dillian Whyte was holding on for dear life in that last round. I scored the fight 113, 112, and I think two of the official judges actually scored it the same way. So it ended up being a very close fight. But he honestly thought Joseph Parker would be an easier fight, and he thought at home I'll get more money for it as well. So he took that fight because of what Eddie Hearn just said to Nestor Gibbs, which he probably would have told Dillian Whyte. That's the advice he would have given Dillian Whyte, which is, let's stay away from Ortiz because that's a really risky fight, Dillian. You could actually lose that fight. And Dillian Whyte didn't want anything to do with Ortiz. That's why he's making all this noise and making all these excuses and stuff like that. Just admit it. You were scared to fight Luis Ortiz. Let's keep it real. Just like you've been ducking your rematch with Derek Chisora, who I agree with Tyson Fury. I think Derek Chisora won that fight by at least 2 rounds, 1 or 2 rounds. Yeah? And not only that, like I said, you ducked Luis Ortiz as well. So stop crying about it and just get on with whatever it is you're doing. Because I've said this before, you may be able to fool the casual AJ fans out there with all this nonsense, but you don't fool me. Yeah, I've been watching the sport long enough to know all these games. So in actual fact, what Tyson Fury said in his war of words with Dillian Whyte on Instagram, Tyson Fury was right. He ducked Ortiz. He's still ducking Chisora in that rematch. Whether that fight actually happens, I don't know, because Chisora's in a good position now after his win over Takam. You can't say, oh, he's too low in the rankings or he hasn't beat anyone notable. He has now. So that fight should really happen. Yeah? And I'm interested to see if that fight will happen now. Yeah, because, you know, Dillian Whyte can't get a fight anywhere else at the moment. He doesn't want to fight Ortiz. Wilder's going to fight Fury. So it would make sense to have the rematch with Chisora. But we'll see if it happens or not. But Tyson Fury's right in what he said to him. And that's why Dillian Whyte's reply was to Tyson Fury, was kind of pathetic, I felt. And then he says, oh, I've knocked you down so many times in sparring. Who cares what happens in sparring? Not be funny, sparring doesn't mean anything when it comes to fight night. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Just because you knocked a guy down 3 or 4 times in sparring doesn't mean you're going to beat him on the night in the ring in an official fight. I mean, look, David Price knocked down Anthony Joshua during sparring, right? Does that mean that David Price would beat Anthony Joshua in an actual fight, in an actual official fight in the ring? Apparently Daniel Dubois knocked down Anthony Joshua in sparring as well. Does that mean Daniel Dubois right now could knock out and beat Anthony Joshua in an actual official fight? No, of course not. That's what sparring is. Sparring is just training. Yeah? It's the whole point of sparring is to learn where your flaws are, to work on your flaws for fight night. It's a way of preparing yourself. It doesn't mean anything. Sparring, that's why all you people who hold on to these sparring stories, they don't mean jack. They don't mean anything. They have no relevance to what's going to happen on fight night. It's completely different being in the gym and sparring and being in front of thousands of fans and fighting for real. But look, I haven't really got much more to say on this whole topic. I think I've made my points quite clearly. You know, Dillian Whyte wants a title shot that bad. talked to his promoter and said, give me Anthony Joshua. He could have done that anytime he wanted to. He didn't have to put himself in a mandatory position to make that fight with Anthony Joshua. But we know why they've gone for the WBO mandatory route with Dillian White now, is because so they can make that fight happen in April. The whole plan was for Eddie Hearn was get Dillian White in the ring with Deontay Wilder. Hopefully Dillian beats Wilder, takes his WBC belt, brings it back to the UK, and then we can have a big, massive domestic unification fight between Anthony Joshua and Dillian White. It hasn't worked out that way. It's completely gone south. So now they just have to settle for Dillian White to be a challenger to Anthony Joshua's titles. And I said this, I've been saying this for like close to a year now. Okay? But the simple fact is, people out there need to stop with this whole, oh, WBC are corrupt and they've conned and screwed Dillian White over. No, they haven't. They have not. And I played you the clip. Mauricio Sulaiman has clearly explained the whole situation. And these things don't just happen in the WBC, and this isn't the first time it's happened. It's happened many times before this. It's also happened in other sanctioning bodies rankings, WBO, IBF, yeah. WBA, they've all done it. That is the nature of the business. That is the boxing business. So stop it. Stop cherry picking when it suits you and suits your agenda, but then ignore it when it happens in the past or if it happens down the line in the future. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys on this one. As always, like, share and subscribe. Until next time, this is Cypherbox reminding you to keep it real.